Have you ever thought about burying something today? You know, like a snapshot of your world. For someone maybe 250 years down the line?
Wow, yeah. What would you even pick?
Exactly. What message do you send? What do you hope they understand about, well, about us?
It's a fascinating idea, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not just sticking stuff in a box. It's like actively trying to talk across centuries.
Yeah.
Shaping how future people see us.
Absolutely. And sometimes it's not just a personal thing. Institutions, governments, they do this too, very deliberately. Which brings us right to our deep dive today, a congressional time capsule. And this isn't just an idea, it's a real government-mandated project, a snapshot of this era.
Yeah, and the plan for it is actually laid out in law. The source we're looking at is H.R.469. The official title is the Semiquincentennial Congressional Time Capsule Act.
So our mission today is to really unpack this act, go beyond the legal text and figure out, what does it actually mean for Congress to create this thing, fill it, bury it, and plan for it to be open way, way in the future.
And why now? That's a key part. It's all tied into the U.S. hitting its 250th anniversary.
Right. What are people in, 2276? Gonna learn about Congress and the country today from whatever gets sealed inside?
It's Congress trying to manage its own legacy, you could say. Picking the message they want to send forward. And H.R. 469 is the actual mechanism.
Okay, so looking at where this bill stands, it's actually moving along, right? Our source says it passed the House of Representatives back on February 26, 2025.
That's right. And then, boom, the very next day, February 27th, it was received by the Senate, got referred to their Committee on Rules and Administration. So yeah, it's definitely in the works.
All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty of the act itself. First big question, who's actually building this thing? The physical capsule.
Okay, so that job, the bill, gives it to the architect of the Capitol.
Ah, okay. That makes sense.
Yeah, they're the ones who handle the Capitol buildings and grounds.
Yeah.
Sort of the official keepers, you could say. So they prep the container, figure out the spot.
So the architect handles the box and the burial site, more or less. But, the really interesting part, the core of it is what goes inside. That's the real message, isn't it? Who decides that?
That's where it gets pretty collaborative. There's not just one person's call. The act says the contents are decided jointly.
Jointly by who?
By the leadership offices.
Yeah.
We're talking Speaker of the House, House Minority Leader, Senate Majority Leader, and Senate Minority Leader.
Wow. Okay, so top leaders, both chambers, both parties.
Exactly. They all have to agree, or at least come to some decision together, on what represents this time period.
That tells you something right there, doesn't it? It's built to require some kind of, consensus, or at least negotiation across the aisle.
Yeah, it definitely suggests the goal is something not purely partisan, in theory anyway. Now, they made the final call, but the act does actually require certain things to be included.
Okay, so it's not a total free-for-all. There are mandatory items.
Right. First up, they need materials related to the semi-quincentennial itself, the 250th anniversary celebration.
Makes sense. Books, maybe some memorabilia.
Yeah, exactly. Books, manuscripts, printed stuff, memorabilia, relics. Basically anything that represents that national milestone.
Okay, commemorating the occasion. Got it. But what about Congress itself? It is a congressional time capsule.
Good point.
Yeah.
And that's the second mandatory category, maybe the most important one for this specific capsule. The act says, copies or representations of important legislative and institutional milestones of Congress during the time before the time capsule was buried.
Important legislative and institutional milestones. That phrase alone.
Yeah.
Wow. What counts as important?
Right. Is it passing a big law? Surviving a crisis? Changing how Congress works?
Just deciding that tells you what the current leadership thinks is significant, what moments define this Congress right now.
Absolutely. That selection process will be incredibly revealing. What story does today's leadership want the future to hear about Congress in the early 21st century? It's like writing your own history entry.
And there's a third required thing, right? Something more direct.
Yeah, a message. Specifically, a message from Congress to the future Congress when the time capsule will be opened. And the act names that future Congress, the 244th Congress.
Whoa. Imagine writing a letter to colleagues like 250 years from now. What do you even say?
It's a unique challenge for sure. What advice, what warnings, what host do you pass on?
And then there's a bit of wiggle room too.
Yes, the act leaves space for such other content as the leadership thinks is appropriate. So maybe something a bit more personal. or cultural about Congress, beyond just the official stuff.
Okay, so that's a complex list of things together. Do they get any help deciding, especially with, what will last or what's historically significant?
They do. The Act says the leadership may consult with experts.
Like who?
It specifically mentions the architect of the Capitol again, the secretary of the Smithsonian Institution.
Ah, the Smithsonian. That makes perfect sense.
Right. They're the experts in curation, preservation, making sure things last and actually mean something centuries later. And it also mentions consulting other relevant federal agencies, too.
You definitely want their input. Make sure those important milestones don't just crumble into dust. Okay, so architect builds it. Leadership decides the contents with expert advice. Where and when does it actually go into the ground?
So the architect handles preparing it for sealing and burial, the location. Specified as the west lawn of the Capitol, the architect picks the exact spot there.
The west lawn.
Okay.
And there's a deadline.
There is. On or before July 4th, 2026. Ties it right into the semi-quincentennial year itself.
Makes sense.
But here's a really interesting detail about the timing of the burial.
Oh, yeah.
But Max says the event at the Capitol should be scheduled so that people attending can also attend the burial of a different time capsule, one happening over in Independence Mall in Philadelphia.
Philadelphia. Why Philadelphia? Is that linked to another law?
It is, yeah. That Philly time capsule is mandated by the United States Semiquincentennial Commission Act of 2016.
Huh. So Congress is deliberately linking its own ceremony at the Capitol with a bigger national event happening where the country was founded.
Exactly. It connects this specific congressional action to the broader national celebration. It's not just happening in isolation.
That's a neat detail. It shows it's part of a bigger picture.
Right.
And presumably they'll mark the spot on the West Lawn?
Yep. The act requires the architect to install a plaque, something saying what's buried there and presumably when it's supposed to be opened, so people walking by will know something significant is underground.
Right, creation, contents, burial, check. Now the really long game, the unveiling. Centuries from now, when does this capsule actually get opened?
The act is crystal clear on this. It says the time capsule shall be sealed until July 4th, 2276.
July 4th, 2276? Wow, exactly 250 years after the burial in 2026? A quarter of a millennium? That really hammers home the timescale they're thinking about.
It really does. And on that specific day, the act says the Speaker of the House of Representatives at that time will present the capsule.
To who?
To the 244th Congress, the very Congress they're writing that message for.
And then what? Does the act say what that future Congress does with it? Put it in a museum?
Actually, it leaves that up to them. The act says the 244th Congress shall determine how the contents within should be preserved or used. So future Congress gets to decide the fate of these items from our time.
Okay, so we've walked through H.R.469. We know who builds it, who picks the stuff inside, what has to go in, where it's buried when it comes out. But let's zoom out a bit. Why does this matter to us right now?
Well, it's not just some bureaucratic exercise, right? This is Congress deliberately crafting its own historical record. By passing this law, they're actively choosing how they want to be seen 250 years from now. It forces a kind of institutional reflection.
Yeah, just think about trying to represent important legislative and institutional milestones from our time. What does that even mean today? Is it about huge laws, how tech changed everything, gridlock, polarization?
Whatever they choose becomes the official story, or at least the story they wanted to tell. It's a statement about what today's leaders value or see as defining.
And that message to the 244th Congress,
Yeah.
What kind of advice or warning would you send to lawmakers centuries from now? It's like legislating introspection.
It really is, and it's a huge challenge, right? Trying to bottle up a complex institution like Congress, let alone the whole country, into a few objects and documents for an audience you can't possibly comprehend.
Makes you think, if you personally had to pick just a few things to represent your life, your community, whatever, for people 250 years from now, what would you pick? What feels essential?
It's tough. What lasts? What matters? What parts of now would even make sense then?
So this deep dive into H.R.469, the Semiquincentennial Congressional Time Capsule Act, it reveals this really fascinating project. It's basically a law designed to create a future piece of history.
Yeah, we saw how it puts the architect of the Capitol in charge of the physical side, building it, burying it on the West Lawn by July 4th, 2026, even coordinating the timing with that Philly event.
And the contents. That's a joint call for the top leaders, bipartisan, both chambers. They have to include stuff about the 250th key congressional moments from before the burial, and that direct message to the 244th Congress.
And then it all gets sealed away for 250 years.
Yeah.
Until July 4th, 2276. Future speaker hands it over to a future Congress, and they decide what to do with our message in a bottle.
It's definitely more than just burying a box. It's Congress trying, very deliberately, to write its own chapter for future history. Which kind of leads us to the final thought, doesn't it? If the whole point is giving future generations a real snapshot, what might the people in 2276 actually miss or misunderstand about our time? Precisely because this specific view is being curated by the people in charge today. What gets left out of the capsule?